All right, good morning, Chair Postman, Member Garrett, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Thanks, Dustin. We'll convene the Liquor and Cannabis Board meeting for January 2nd, 2024. Member Vollendorf is traveling today and won't be here. Happy New Year, everybody. Our first agenda item is a policy and rules team update. And I will turn it over to Cass City West, our policy and rules manager.
Hi, good morning. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, I hope everyone had a good New Year. It's good to be back though. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start with some cannabis updates, and then Daniel's going to go ahead and do the updates for his projects, and then he has a presentation for the board. So to start out, we have a petition that we received on requiring heavy metals testing. We have not received any comments so far on that. The response is to be presented on January 31st, and Denise, our new rules coordinator, is working on that. So we do always love public comments on this and any other rulemaking. So please send them our way. If you have questions about how to comment or how to do effective commenting, please reach out. We would love to help you, and we do have some resources on the website as well. So with that, actually, I'll give an update on social equity. No changes in the timeline. We're still planning on doing the CR 102 in April. So we'll be holding stakeholder engagement in February and March, but I do want to just mention that people don't need to wait for stakeholder engagement to reach out and give us comments. So please feel free to go ahead and do that. Let's see, we have the THC bill. So we held stakeholder engagement for that in December, and I'll be sending up a follow-up survey next week that has some of kind of the tail end topics that we still need to get feedback on following the discussion. And then we plan to have the CR 102 for that presented at the end of January or early February. Let's see. Sampling, no update right now on that. Just trying to get through the THC bill. So we do expect to pick that one back up in February as well. And then the last item I have is we accepted a petition in 2022 regarding to extend a COVID allowance and allow minors, so under the age of 16, on the premises of a producer license under certain circumstances. We have not received any comments to date on that. We want to go ahead and just make sure that the public can get us any information, or if you do have comments, because we're going to look at either initiating that rulemaking or closing it out, depending on what we receive over the next couple of weeks. And so we'll accept comments on that until the end of February. So any questions on any of that stuff?
Quick question on the heavy metal testing petition. When we did the rulemaking around mandatory pesticide testing, there we had a lot of discussions around heavy metal. It was never included in that rules package, but we talked about it a lot. And I don't know if there's already material there from those days that could remind me why we didn't do that in the original mandatory testing. I think there was just kind of a sense that it might have been too much to bite off at one time or something. But if that's something that you can find to refresh my memory of why then we didn't do all that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll look into that, and I'll get back to you on that stuff. So thanks.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Don't see any other questions. So move to alcohol.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only other update I have on cannabis rulemaking is the medical cannabis endorsement rulemaking project. We initially had intended to file the CR 102 on January 31st, but given that there are now going to be 2 petitions that need to be presented that day, as well as tentatively the 103 on the alcohol delivery project, this timeline for the medical cannabis endorsement project is being pushed out a little bit. Instead, we're going to tentatively be filing the 102 at the end of February, which would put the public hearing in April, and rules would be in effect by the end of May. And then the only other timeline update I have is not as much of an update, but just a reminder that the public hearing for the alcohol delivery 5448 and Mass 13 rulemaking is still scheduled for the 17th. And then assuming that goes well, we're, on schedule to get those rules, the 103 filed by the end of January, which would have those rules in effect by beginning of March. And with that, I will, I'm going to just preview the 102 that I intend to present for tomorrow on trade area.
Yeah.
So if approved, we're tentatively going to be having the public hearing on Wednesday, February 14th, which would have the 103 filed February 28th, rules in effect March 30th. Just as some brief background, Washington Administrative Code 314021071 defines the term trade area as it is used in RCW 6624-630. That law requires spirit retailers to be at least 10,000 square feet in contiguous space, subject to a few exceptions. One of those exceptions is if there's no other spirits retailer in the trade area of the proposed new store, which means basically you can open a spirits retailer that's smaller than 10,000 square feet if, among other things, there aren't other stores in this trade area. But the statute doesn't define the term trade area, which then leaves it to us to define it, which we do in the regulation I just cited. Trade area is currently defined as 20 miles, unless we are talking about locations on some of the islands or we're talking about former state liquor stores. Now, this term trade area, we defined it after liquor privatization in 2013. And during that rulemaking process, there was a proposal to include stores on tribal land and owned by tribes as also exempt from the trade area requirement, which would have allowed stores on tribal land or owned by tribes to open regardless of whether they're 10,000 square feet. That proposal didn't find its way into the final rule language. And as a result, some tribes were not able to open spirits retailers as a result. This rule project that was filed and started back in May is meant to take a second look at that decision, not to include the tribal language, and to see if that needs to be reconsidered. So as I mentioned, the 101 was filed in May. Draft rule language was initially circulated in July, followed by a tribal engagement session. After we got feedback following that engagement session, the rules team reconvened several times, came up with some new rule language. That rule language was posted on our website in October, followed by 2 tribal engagement sessions in early November, and then a public stakeholder engagement session later in November. The proposed rule language here does 3 main things. One, it removes an outdated reference to how the LCB measures 20 miles. Second, it cleans up the language about the retailers located on some of the islands, just because it was worded a little weird, talking about method of transportation other than automobile. We just wanted to sort of make it clear what we're talking about. And then the third thing it does is it adds in language exempting retailers that are in Indian country owned by tribes or tribal enterprises from this 20-mile distance requirement, with also some relevant definitions being proposed. Following the November stakeholder engagement session, we received some industry feedback in the form of some proposed amendments. And these amendments I've attached to the 102 memo that's included in the materials to be presented in more detail tomorrow. But those amendments basically seek to expand the pool of spirit retailers that can be exempt from the 20-mile distance requirement. It also seeks to add a requirement that LCB have to provide notice to stores that would be within 20 miles of a newly opened tribal store. The rules team decided against including these suggestions. And regarding the first one, sort of expanding the pot of the stores that would be exempt, this rule project has always been intentionally narrow in scope. The goal of this project has never been to sort of open the floodgates for spirit retailers statewide or expand the number of spirit retailers within Washington borders. And in line with that, we're trying to keep the rule language narrow. Secondly, or lastly, the notice requirement would entail LCB providing notice to private entities about the actions of a sovereign nation, which would kind of run against the grain of what we're trying to do with this rule project, which is to return oversight of these businesses to the sovereign nations that they reside within. Thank you. That's what I've got, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Quick question first on the notification piece. Was the suggested amendment that the tribe would be required to do that notification, or we would?
The notification, the requirement was for us to. The
Okay.
idea would be that basically, because they were, the idea is that the stores that are going to be within 20 miles of a newly opened tribal store, those stores should be notified, and that we should be the ones to notify them. But like I said, the spirit of this rule project is to return oversight of these businesses to the tribes. And so us providing notice about the actions essentially of another nation, it's a little counter to what we're trying to do with the project. And it also just, I don't know that it seems to fully respect the government to government relationship.
I think that's a good question. Yeah.
Because it's not us that's granting a new license. It would be the sovereign nations opening these stores, because the stores in question are owned by the tribe or a tribal enterprise. So it's the tribe that would be opening the store. If the tribe wants to provide the notice to these private stores outside of tribal land, that's up to them. But I don't know that it's our place to be providing notice essentially on behalf of the tribes.
Yeah, good question. I'm not certain. Yeah. Okay. And then a more general question. Tell me what's the state interest in having a minimum square footage size store? What is why do we not want smaller stores that sell spirits?
That's a good question. That's actually in the statute. So I'm not entirely, I would, and this is something from the 1183 days. My guess would be that there was a concern when that happened that liquor stores would be all over the place. I think it was, which paired in part with the trade area, but which is why actually, the state allowed for an exception for former state liquor stores, and then for stores that don't have other stores within a trade area. But in terms of why the state would have an interest in a store being 10,000 square feet versus 8,000,
right?
That I'm not entirely clear on. I think there were a lot of concerns about what the landscape of liquor sales were going to look like, after privatization, and the 10,000 square foot requirement seems to be part of that.
Yeah, so it just never really struck me until you were just giving us this presentation. I wonder why we did that when we did that. I mean, may have been something in the initiative itself, but anyhow.
Sure, and I can also follow up. I mean, there are plenty of folks here who in the agency who were here at the time. I wasn't, but I can see if I can reach out and get a little bit more clarity on that for tomorrow. I'm not sure that I'll be able to, but I can give it a go.
That's okay. And I'm not sure we need it by tomorrow, but maybe before we're all done, it'd just be good for us to understand what that reasoning was. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, thanks, Mr. Jacobs.
All right, thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks.
And that's it. That's our agenda for today, other than reports. Anything, Dustin, to start the year?
Happy New Year. That's about it for me.
Member Garrett?
No, Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year. Here we go again.
Exactly.
Okay.
Here we go again.
Here we go again. One more year. Okay, great. Well, then we will just see us all at least tomorrow morning at 10 for the board meeting. And with that, we will adjourn the caucus for January 2nd. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.